Okay, Charlie Matutuyela back with another episode of Left Behind Natives. And today I have the honor of speaking with and interviewing Dr. Kenneth Barnett Tankersley, who is a member of the Piqua Tribe of Alabama, of Shawnee. And he is also on the Elders Council as well as the tribe's NAGPRA representative. And I know some of you may not know what NAGPRA is. It's of course, an acronym for something much longer, and we'll get to what he does with that in a minute because it is very important and something people do need to know about. But just to start off, Ken, before I ask you any of my questions, tell us a little about yourself.
Um, Oshio Ogin Ali, Denali Ulu, Cha Aniuia, Cha Piqua Shawano, Cha Anidiki Sha, Cha Misi Kinekwa. My name's Ken. I'm of Cherokee heritage. As you mentioned, I'm a member of the Piqua Tribe of Alabama. I'm a member of the Turtle Clan, and my name is Little Turtle. Primarily, my grandmother, when I was born, saw there was a turtle on my arm and called me Little Turtle, and I've had the name ever since.
Oh, that's great. It reminds me of a historic Cherokee name that I have always wondered what it meant. And my wife and I have tried to decide what this name meant for a long time. And I know you and I have talked about some traditional Cherokee names, one of them, of course, specifically being Bark Flute, the man that was named after a bark flute, of course, that today very few people know about or have heard of. But one of them, the name that I see often, he was on a lot of the early roles, was Turtle at Home. This isn't one of our questions, but I've always wondered what Turtle at Home means. Do you have any idea?
Oh, it. I always think of when I think of turtle. Of course, we live on Turtle Island, and there's many creation stories of how the turtle allowed that to come to be. Um, but I always think of turtle at home as essentially a reference to someone who lives in the homeland. So it's interesting. So
Yeah, it is an interesting name. So many of our names do, and I mean, well, historically, all of our names meant something really specific, and today, even though Sali is a common Cherokee name, it's just a copy of Charlie. To my knowledge, Sali wasn't really a typical name before, European involvement. But Turtle at Home, when I think about it, I always think that he's like protecting himself, or maybe he's a protector of other people. I don't know. But it's just like I say, just a question, something that popped into my mind when you said that.
Well, it's interesting because that name in particular essentially is the reason I wrote this. Steve Blackbear and I wrote the book Little Turtle and Bear. It's a children's book,
Oh,
but
great.
it essentially means the story is about you're never alone. And a lot of young Native people who are at risk of committing suicide, it's a reminder that you're never alone and we carry our home with us.
Right,
Many, some tribes, for example, your home is where your umbilical cord is. And
right.
in order to leave your homeland, to put it in a turtle shaped, often a beaded turtle that you wear so you can take your home with you. So, but anyway, no, I love the name as well.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of important names, a lot of them that people don't know, and of course some of them have been shortened, like Stan Wati. He took his father, I believe, his father's first name or only name, which was Uwati, which means the ancient one, and so they call him Stand. which was his Indian name, but they called him Wati. I've got a couple of grands and great grands and great great grands that their names I had often wondered what they meant. One of them's name was Epsy. People call him Eps, and I have searched high and low and couldn't find anything. And eventually, I found and I keep a dictionary of Old Muskogee, and this dictionary was written, I think, in the 1930s or 40s. But I keep that dictionary on my phone, and there are names that look like Epsy on there, and it means like water carrier. It means carries a bag of like bladder water or something like that. So, I don't know if that's where his name originated. I wasn't aware that he was Muskogee. I wouldn't be surprised considering where he and his family were from. And his father's name was Hosea, also originally from South Carolina, and they before that their family came from Virginia, and of course they were some of the original stock of the people that were from Virginia. So it could be, could be that they were Muskogee. And I looked up the name Hosea, and I'm like, Hosea sounds like a Spanish or a Latin name. Maybe that would be what it was from. But at the time that his family was in South Carolina and his family was in Virginia, there were no Spaniards around. So that's kind of unusual. And I looked it up, and of course, I found an old Muskogee word that looked like Hosea, and it has its own meaning, which was pretty interesting. But like I said, that's kind of not even our questions that I was wanting to ask you, but just very interesting. Language and words and names, all these things are very important, and oftentimes people forget about it.
A lot of people do forget meanings. For example, Suli means the great buzzard.
Hmm.
But a lot of people don't realize, for example, in Cherokee, rather than great buzzard, it's great eagle. So a great eagle is actually a turkey vulture.
Right,
So which
right,
goes back
right.
to the creation stories about
Yes.
how the great eagle, or as people call today, the turkey vulture, created the mountains and the valleys.
Right, right. After the flood, and
Absolutely.
so many pieces of truth in that. The little water bug, the water beetle, and the water strider, and the beaver, and so many animals in those stories. It's just amazing. I wish that sometimes I wish that somebody would take up the notion and they would do like this, do like a podcast or some YouTube videos or something. But today there's a lot of people that are more interested in hiding the history and only sharing it with two or three people, which I've heard them say this, directly, instead of sharing it with everybody. And um, I've heard a lot of people say that there are no full-blooded this and full-blooded that left in the United States and throughout most of the world, of course, that we've all been mixed and what have you. And I see no reason why it is that we shouldn't share these things. And that's, of course, what inspired me. I don't know if you know much about my flute business, but that's what inspired me to help people learn how to make flutes, which is what I do in my regular job. But let's get into this first question here, Dr. Tankersley. You had written an article, and I told you that a friend of mine sent it to me. Um, she is a member of a tribe in Virginia. She lives in another state, but she's a member of a tribe in Virginia and a very trusted friend that we're always looking for important information, about people that have either dealt with some of the things we've dealt with or have seen. And she sent me your article that was called Indigenous McCarthyism and Identity Policing. This article was on the Native News online, and it's not actually, believe it or not, it's not actually a platform that I frequent. I know some of the people that are involved with it, and um, there's certain ideas that some of them have, and I mean, most of us disagree with mainstream media. I think these days, I wouldn't call Native News Online necessarily mainstream, and they have some great articles, and I do see it pretty regularly. So I'm not putting them down by any means. I just don't necessarily see eye to eye with a lot of works that make their ways through there. But I was so proud and so happy to see your article in there because when I started reading it, I realized, as I was telling you earlier, that I feel a little less alone. I've had people um, attack my grandparents who've been passed on for years through me and blame whatever it is that I've got going on them. And these same people have even attacked the necklace that I wear, which I wear everywhere I go and everywhere, anything I do. And I've got, I think I may have made a YouTube video on my other channel about where this comes from and what have you. But it's made out of a jade, red pipestone, and fire agate that uh, two sets of these beads were something that a friend traded me so many years ago who meant so much to me, and he was a powerful mentor and so much more than that, and he's passed on now, of course, too. But these people attacked the beads that I wear, and and not only attack them, but tried to devalidate them and invalidate them by saying that they were made out of wood, as if that was not so good.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
uh, but if you would tell me, that article you wrote struck a powerful chord with a lot of people. What inspired you to write it, and what did you hope that readers would take away from it?
Well, since the advent of the internet, um, un- as Native people, we found there's some really mean spirited
Mhm.
people out there. And I'm being kind.
Yes.
Um, and there are two impacts: ego side, which is what you've just been describing, where they try to empower themselves by making you feel less. And unfortunately, ego side today is causing our young people, it's putting them at risk and they're committing suicide. And then the other is poly-side. Well, my tribe is better than your tribe, or my tribe is a real tribe, your tribe is a fake tribe, or I'm a real Indian, you're a fake Indian. And it just goes on and on. But over the past couple years, it's come to a head in terms of trying to have certain groups, trying to have state recognized tribes removed from the Native American Arts and Crafts Act. And then that same group trying to have state recognized tribes removed from the National Congress of American Indians. And last year, when a vote was taken at the National Congress of American Indians, where overwhelmingly the National Congress of American Indians voted to keep state recognized tribes within the National Congress, a lot of people of this group were not happy. And at the last meeting, they put flyers on seats to, again, and it's disinformation. There are people stand up and provide disinformation, not only at meetings, in front of governmental officials, and of course on the internet. Um, I thought I have to do something. So at that juncture, I wrote Native News and News from Indian Country Today are the two areas for where most Native people get their news. So I thought it's time to at least set the record straight, let people know what's going on. And one of the things which they were obfuscating is they were taking federally recognized tribes and then they were comparing it to state recognized tribes and tribes that have neither federal nor state recognition and lumping them together. Well, if you want to have a category non federally recognized, that's correct. Um, but there are some legal issues. They did not understand that state recognized tribes have every bit of legitimacy, legal legitimacy under the United States Constitution as federally recognized tribes. They probably didn't remember that at one time all tribes in the United States at the beginning of America were state recognized tribes. The 10th
Right.
Amendment allows states to make essentially legal binding agreements with indigenous peoples living within their state, even to the point of having reservations within their state. This is federal law, not state law. And unless they're going to get rid of the 10th Amendment and change that, they can't do anything about state recognized tribes. But the average public does not know this. The other thing is they forget the termination period. In the 1830s, as you well know, your ancestors, my ancestors, those who wanted to remain associated with the federal government were forced to move east of the Mississippi. Others who did not remained in their homeland. And for all intents and purposes, their affiliation with the federal government was terminated, thus the name termination period. And again, in the 1950s, within my lifetime, the federal government went to settler colonist, white settler colonist anthropologists, and asked who were the real Indians. Well, one of the people was Alfred Kroeber in California. He had Ishi, who he claimed was the last real Indian, and using Ishi as a member of the last of his tribe, which he was not, but he used it as this is a real Indian. So all other Indians, by comparison, who were not like Ishi, were not real Indians. Well, as a result, settler colonist anthropologists, old white guys, in the 1950s essentially eliminated 109 tribes and reclaimed over 1 million acres of tribal land. They confiscated it. Now, most of those tribes have since regained state recognition, but they have not obtained federal recognition. So, with the National Congress of American Indians, those who lost federal recognition remember those days. And even those who used to be completely unrecognized became state recognized and then went on to be federal recognized. They remember what it was like to be terminated and they
Right.
supported state recognized tribes. But someone had to remind people there's just so much untruths, falsehoods, and that's not our way. Our way is the way of the good red road. That
Right.
is the way of the black road.
Yeah. You know, I've been in a few meetings with some of those tribes whose land have been infringed on and they were de-recognized. You know, I originally as a kid and through much of my adult life, I thought there was only maybe one of those because we have the historic example of the Lumbee, for example, and how the Lumbee Act was passed, and they were basically made to never be allowed to be federally recognized. And so here in recent times, this is 2025, in recent times, they've written in and had signed by the current president the Lumbee Cares Act, which we hope is a path for them to become federally recognized. There are other tribes, of course, the ones in Virginia that were denied, and once they were denied, they made a case with the U.S. judicial system. So they took it beyond the recognition process and just went straight to one of the branches of the government that normally wouldn't deal with this and made the case with them. And that has become the new path for a lot of people to try to get their tribe recognized, because even though you know, on the rights level, state and federal recognition, are the same on the rights level. There is help that the federal recognition tribes receive that state recognition tribes don't receive, and that's really the goal. And oftentimes, um, the only way I've noticed, as a matter of fact, I was speaking with a friend just recently. I mean, even today, for that matter, about tribes in Virginia that were just a few years ago, just recently federally recognized, um, and they had a law that was written into their recognition that said they could not have a casino, which often, though I may not agree with casinos, a lot of tribes do for the sake of finding a quick, easy way for them to make money to support their tribe. Because as we know, everything requires money today. But these tribes were not um, allowed. It was written in their contract of the stipulations of their recognition that they could not be allowed to have a casino. So what has happened is one of the other tribes who is very skilled at making casinos went in and they talked with them, and they're like, if you would let us put a casino on your land, then we will split some of the proceeds with you. And they're they agreed, which I feel terrible because um, I already have feelings about the tribe with all the casinos, and I mean, well, I don't know if the words feelings are correct. I think it's more like inner knowledge of workings. I know the political structure of. There's a lot of ways I could candy coat it without coming out and saying something, but I know how they operate, and I have a feeling that the tribe who was kind enough to make this agreement, um, who couldn't have a casino of their own, they're probably going to find out how they operate too, because I have seen that firsthand from other tribes that have wanted to have casinos in areas where my family live, and they have tried to make these arrangements. And I don't know if the arrangements have currently been made or not, because a lot of these things, just like you had mentioned the the meeting with the NCAI and the vote that they took to remove state recognized tribes. To my knowledge, uh, most recently, 6 months ago, that vote was passed. And I don't know that it has been rescinded. I believe that they removed quite a few of us. A dear friend of mine had told me about it immediately once it happened, and I double checked with one of my state reps, and so that, a lot of information moves slowly in Indian country, and that's why I try to be on top of things like you, try to be on top of things. Not a lot of people are able to do that.
Yeah.
But
No, to my knowledge, that there were still listed. Um, no, there are regional meetings, of course, and then there's
right.
the national meeting. But it's something that it's going to come up again and again and again.
Oh yeah.
There was a motion to deny Lumbee federal recognition because there's no language, no speaking, even though there's a very distinctive dialect.
Yeah.
Um, Arguing for people who have lost their last native speaker. That's the concern of Indian policing. What about the
Right.
current federally recognized tribes where there is no current fluent speaker of the language? So do they lose their, what about tribes that are federally recognized and have no land? Should they be removed? Or how about uh, tribes that have neither land nor a language? Should they be? So how far do we go? And as far as I can tell, it's always over money.
Yes.
What is
Yes.
the threat? Well, the threat is to our sovereignty. Well, actually, it's the sovereignty of state recognized tribes that's being threatened, not
That's
the
right.
sovereignty of federally recognized tribes. And it's also the argument that somehow we're stealing money away. State recognized tribes are stealing money away from the federally, which is, again, complete nonsense.
Right.
So I was hoping that in my writings and and through your podcast that people can be educated about the truth.
Right. Yeah, because the truth is an amazing thing. I think it's been said that the truth will set you free, and the problem is, and I've read the quote from so many people that too many good men say nothing, you know, and that's it's definitely something that holds true. I myself, I have spoken as you have on behalf of all of our people on so many levels. And at times, I've been commanded by some of the leaders of various tribes, including my own, which I'm not going to deny. I've been commanded that I stop speaking because I'm getting them in trouble with certain people, probably the same certain people who want those casinos in our land. uh, but uh, but anyway, we've covered a lot of my questions for you already, and it's amazing. And I know you probably feel as I do. It's amazing how much all of this ties together. All of it does, and oftentimes it is by money. And I'm not here to talk Cherokee history or culture or heritage or anything, but I will tell you. Um, about one of my cousins. I think he was a third cousin who was the first chief in the early 1900s of the Cherokee Nation at that time, known as the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. But this, of course, is before their federal recognition. You know, the government had dissolved, like you said, all of our tribes. And in 1942, the U.S. government selected one of my distant cousins, JB Milam, to become the new chief of the tribe to try to reorganize the tribe. And you know, in my mind, I've already got these wheels moving, asking the important questions. Why does the government give a flip about us one way or the other? At this point, they destroyed us, and 40 years later, suddenly we're useful. Now, stopping there for just a moment, putting that idea on a side burner, JB Milam, of course, was a banker, as were several of the original new chiefs of the tribe. There was still one or two more after him that were selected by the U.S. government before natives had their own voting for their own leaders, which is kind of interesting. Um, but he did some amazing, great things for all of our people, and he was known to have had great libraries full of family data and records. And I wonder sometimes if I should visit one of his libraries that's still open in Tahlequah that has information about our family in it, our joined family. And they go back, a long ways back to Virginia. But but oftentimes, the focus I have noticed has been on two things. Um, and I'm saying this not to alienate races of people, but I'm just saying it this way to put a fine point on it. White man's money and white man's laws, not Indian getting along and Indian rules, but white man's money and white man's laws. And it's kind of interesting to say the least that the government had, and once again, this is easy information to find. It's on Wikipedia for crying out loud. But JB Milam, was originally a banker from. He was born in Italy, Texas, which I've got family, of course, from Italy, Texas. It's about this big. It's 1.7 square miles. I mean, we're talking about. I can't believe there's even a name on this town. But both of us shared a lot of things in common. Family from Rusk and Smith County and what have you. But we did share, a great grandfather, which is important. But it's just amazing how much all of this just really circles around the M word, money.
Yeah.
And it's something, and it really shows in the ways that things are politicized, you know, and how we are policed by our own people, which is a terrible notion. Um, but
It's and you think about blood quantum. The
Mm,
Degree of Indian Blood. It
right.
was created by Thomas Jefferson in terms of, especially with the creation of the Electoral College. But the idea, what DNA lab was around in the days of Thomas Jefferson? Interesting question.
You
There
know,
were
I've
none.
Yeah, you're
So
right. And speaking of DNA, I noticed a quote in your book that I want to make sure by the end we talk about it. But this book here, I think, has changed my life. Like I told you before we began, it gave me hope and understanding that there are people that have been through some of what I've been through and what inspired me to do this podcast, among other things. But you have a quote in here from someone, which let me see here. I can say her name without looking her up, but here's the quote. It's on indigeneity, um, Indian identity. To fully understand the settler colonial weapons of ecocide and policide, it is important to briefly review their history. As Kim Tallbear has noted, indigeneity and tribal identity are more than blood quantum. And that's amazing stuff. I'm glad you quoted her in here because I have one of Kim's books. Um, when my daughter wanted to go into anthropology, which she graduates this Sunday, I'm so proud of. But when she wanted to go into anthropology, I gave her my copy of this book about Indian DNA that Kim Tallbear had written, and Kim, of course, I believe a doctor as yourself. I'm not sure what her specific areas of study are in, but uh, some great works and a quote that you and I both wholeheartedly agree on. However, one of the groups of natives who do a lot of policing that I have been in unfortunate contact with have uh, have also quoted her, and forgive me, Kim, I don't mean to misquote, but I believe partnered with her in some levels on this policing effort. And I'm not going to mention their names. You know, that's not this isn't a program about slamming other people. It's just making people aware of things. However, this other group, um, I have been told by members of the group that they work with her on policing us over the same thing that she and we have written and spoke about, which is a painful thing to understand. Um, but uh, but you know, it's really it's an epidemic. It really is. You know, and I don't know what we can do about it. I do feel the pain from it, and I do know that standing here before the world and telling them about it is important. But I don't know what we can do about it. What do you think, in your experience, could be done?
well, as you mentioned, Kim Tallbear is the foremost expert on Native American DNA. And the issue, Native American is cultural, not genetic. And that's what she was trying to get across, of who
Sure.
was and who was not a member of a tribe. When it was first established with Thomas Jefferson, he used craft paper, a piece of brown paper like a grocery bag, to put on someone's skin. If they were as dark or darker, then they were a full blood. If they were half a hue, then they were half blood and quarter, and so on and so forth.
Mm,
And then it gets reinstituted during the 1950s, or I'm sorry, during the Depression era, with the so-called Indian New Deal, where blood quantum comes in again. And again, it's
right.
all over money. It's
Yeah.
unfortunately all about money. But now we're all facing. How many people? It used to be, although mercifully for those of us who are in tribes of Alabama, there is access to universities and college through the state. But we lost through the loss of diversity, equity, and inclusion as underrepresented minorities, federal and state recognized tribes of law as well. we've lost those programs. We've lost the road to education. I mean, there's so much common ground. We should be working not together, not fighting against one another. And
Right.
all tribes have a word for harmony. We say no wata hiatu, which essentially means harmony, to live in harmony, and to remind ourselves we're all on this journey together. And this divisiveness is as far away from that as you possibly can get. And we're always reminded there's tricksters on the good red road who are trying to pull us away from that path of harmony. And these mean spirited people, it seems like they're off the path.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I don't know if you got to see the episode with my friend Purify, but she had also noted that there's some underlying um, system that we can see. It's one of those things that you know it's there, but it's like the air. You can't really feel anything when you touch it. Although now that I'm doing it, I kind of feel like I can feel the air. But she had mentioned that it seemed like these people were being paid, and once again, full circle, it goes back to the white man's money. And I can tell you from my own experience in this, and this is meant to be a positive podcast, not one where we slam people and point out their failings, but just following this path that many of these people are on, there is there's a pattern. And though I may have studied some psychology, I won't call myself a psychologist, nor would I trust one. But anyway, unless your degree is in psychology, in which case I do trust you. But no. But anyway, I see a pattern that a lot of these native police that are stalking so many of us, and really that are doxing us and doing everything in the world to try to destroy us. I see some patterns. Number one, they have contact with another tribe that they're not related to in any way, shape, or form. And having been in the belly of that particular organization in my life, I know there's a lot of money going out in various places, but I don't have to prove that because these particular organizations that I'm speaking of actually admit it publicly. They admit that they spend millions of dollars trying to destroy us. I've saved countless articles in various newspapers where they've said this, um, which that alone has to tell somebody something. Uh, but uh, but I know how they spend that money. They're not spending it on changing the value of pork bellies, pork belly futures. They're not doing it that way. They're paying people. Oftentimes they pay leaders. Oftentimes they pay internet sensations and people. And well, I think when they get really frustrated is when they find out they can't pay us, the ones of us who have beliefs and who still maintain what I would like to consider the actual identity of being Native. We're not as affected by white man's money, and we're not afraid of white man's laws, although we may be affected by it. We usually don't exhibit signs of being afraid of it. But anyway, I notice it all leads back to the same organizations. And of course, I'm not pointing any fingers, although people could probably put two and two together. Anybody that knew me would know what I would think. But I've also noticed one other criteria that a lot of these people have, um, especially when I see them in various locations and what have you, or when I've heard them speak about their own personal flawed histories, and how they call them flawed histories. Many of them grew up outside of their people, and growing up outside of your people, you have a longing to be included. Myself, I didn't grow up outside of my people. I grew up around countless people that I knew were native, whether they were or were not a member of a federal, a state, or any tribe recognized or otherwise. I grew up with Native people. I knew they were Native people, and many of them are my cousins and family and friends. But I have lived in the Southeast much of my life, and I have noticed people that I personally recognize as being native that may not themselves know that they're native. Now, this doesn't make up all of the people I grew up with, mind you. Most of the people I grew up with, identified whether their skin was black, white, or whatever, brown. They identified as Native American, and those are the ones I'm talking about. But here in the Southeast, there's a lot of people that look native to me that aren't even aware. And it reminds me of something that a young man who's a member of one of our state tribes here in Alabama, and I've mentioned it to you off the podcast, but I want to say it here. He actually summed up something that it gave me a little bit of hope for somebody his age. He's in college. I don't know him personally, but I do know he's in college, and I know what tribe he belongs to, or rather is a member of. And he uh, he was in the middle of this feeding frenzy by a lot of those people who were talking anti-state recognized, only federal recognized, and what have you. And he held his own. He wasn't affected by the people that were putting him down. He simply stated, one of the people said that all natives move from Alabama in the southeast, they moved to Oklahoma. He simply stated in one sentence that no, we didn't. Some of us stayed behind, got jobs, went to work, and had a family. And that's absolutely the truth. I mean, I've got those exact words paraphrased in court documents, in treaties, in countless locations. But many people like to only pretend that that didn't happen. And I'm very aware of military generals that had other things that they said. But when you look at the sheer amount of people that were here, that were or were not considered XYZ quantum of blood lineage, there's no way they moved that many people to Oklahoma. And likewise, I believe that I have mentioned that I do have a distant relative, and oftentimes natives like myself and like you, we don't like to speak about our passed on relatives, but this one, because he's passed away, I feel more comfortable mentioning, and I'm not going to say his name, but he was a member of and I know this, of course, because I've done so much research on my family, but he was a member of the federally recognized Choctaw Band of Mississippi. And he was a member of that tribe. And at the time that natives were being allotted land in Oklahoma, he said, I'm going to go get some land out there too. I might need a vacation home. This is a family member. He has a last name that, my cousins all share. And he may or may not have been a good guy. I don't know, but he was a member of the Mississippi Choctaws, and I have got a copy of his application to the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, and it said not accepted because he was already a member of the Mississippi Choctaws. And I can't help but feel like either a mistake was made, which is possible. He thought, I don't want to live in Mississippi anymore. I just want to move to Oklahoma. Or maybe somebody else, of course, could have been using his name. Very doubtful. But more than likely, he was trying to double dip on the land allotments. That's what I think. And that's a unique place to be in, and that's one thing that I appreciate about you is that can you have been in so many unique positions, and that's one thing that I feel like is a camaraderie between the two of us, is that you have taught Native American studies in college,
Mm.
and you are Native American, and you have spoken to Native American people about, once again, McCarthyism, that everybody needs to know what's going on here. And if you could say anything else that would be good advice to younger Native people from state recognized or non-recognized tribes or ones that aren't members of tribes, if you could say one thing to them to help inspire them, as your books have already inspired me for the very short time that I've had them, but your writings, of course, have for a while, and there's so much about your history. You're going to have to come back on the podcast. There's so much other stuff we could talk about, but if there's one thing that you could say to the Native youth in those situations, what would you tell them? How could they protect themselves from being quote unquote hurt by these people?
It's important for young people and all Native people to remember you are not alone. You are not alone. And we really are on this journey together. It just, we are who we are. We don't need, in reality, we don't need a governmental agency telling us who we are, where we came from, where our ancestors are. Every young person, every Native person has transgenerational strength. And that strength comes from our ancestors. We are the seventh generation. And we need to remember that one day we will be the ancestors and other people will be standing on our shoulders. So we always have to ask ourselves, what kind of ancestor do we want to be?
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you that's how I was raised, um, believing in myself, knowing who I am. And when I read the words from some of these people that about me specifically saying that my family lied to me, they realized that I grew up Native. Uh, they wanted to try to take me apart and make me less valuable because I had spoken at a publicly seen um, forum with the U.S. government. It was immediately after that that I was attacked by these people, and so they tried to take away from me something that they admitted I already had. I grew up Native, and as far as our ancestry and like we've talked, I know you have probably uh, done a lot of your genealogy, but my own genealogy, the thing that I'm most interested in is what my family went through and how they got to where they were at. And I've noticed something else that I'll share with you here that helps identify Native people is their migrational patterns. You know, um, I've read that by other great Native American writers, Vine Deloria, of course, um, but other great Native American writers, people from Virginia, like I said, that are Helen Roundtree, for example, has said the same thing that you can tell someone's native ancestry by their travels, by their ancestors' travels, where they started at, where they went, and how they got there. And I've taken it a step further. I've noticed, and this is something that I feel like we'll agree on. I've noticed that not only is it the path that we take, and we can actually call that the good red road as well. The path that our ancestors took to get here, we can call it that. And a lot of times people have a hard time, seeing the forest for the trees, and they have a hard time understanding what they consider to be Native American symbolism isn't symbolism. We're talking about the absolute cold, hard facts. We're just describing it in a different way, like people out west say that we're all related. That's a common thing that they say, and that's what we've been discussing this whole time. Um, but um, but I noticed that oftentimes when groups of Native people migrate to an area, my family came a long ways to get to Alabama. They did. I know where most of them came from on my dad's side, um, but they came a long ways to get to Alabama. But when they got here, just as when they stopped in South Carolina and Georgia and Tennessee and everywhere else on the way, they stayed with their own people. they hung out with their own people. And that's why, like you and I belong to these tribes here in Alabama. Um, is it important that we belong to a tribe? Not necessarily. Does it make us Indian? No. Um, but is it important that we stay around and hang out with our own people and communicate with and fellowship with our own people? And not necessarily in a religious way, but if that's what you got, that's okay too. But if we get along with our own people and what have you, that's also important, you know. And you'll notice, like I say, historically, that a lot of, especially our people here in Alabama, started off in Virginia and or Pennsylvania. They moved to Virginia. Some of them went to, some of the coastal waters above Virginia. Can't say if those were or were not native or non-native people. Many of them moved to North Carolina, right over the line. It's over the state line. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, there's a Scotland County, Virginia, just like there's a Scotland County, North Carolina, where a lot of my family had lived at one point in time. And then they move down and down and down. And everywhere they stop, I notice there's groups of other Native people that, whether they were, if we want to call it recognized, or if we would just want to say groups of Native people, I don't care who recognizes us. You'll notice that they stayed with their own people and they were recognized by their own people and they, did things with their own people and everything of the sort, So that's my observation anyway. Uh, so, in rounding things up here and getting close to the end, I'd like to point out this book here, The Cherokee of the Cumberland, that you wrote. I haven't got to start it yet. Like I said, once I picked that other one up, I haven't been able to set it down. I had to skim through it a little bit, but I had read some reviews of it, and it's amazing. I know it's amazing, and a lot of people really love it. And then here's another one that I think that when we come back, if you're willing to do another episode with us, I think I'd like to talk about this book because there are some ties that you and I share, that I have understanding about because of my mom's side of the family, not to mention, just history in general. This book here, Rebury My Heart at Wounded Knee, I think some of the content in here and some of the things we've talked about off recording, I think I'd like to discuss with you. I think it probably would shed some light on some other things going on in our native country today. And of course, like I said, I can't say enough about this book. You know, this one is something else. I have my wife that I discuss a lot of the episodes with. She picked this book up before I even cracked it open, and she read the introduction, and she's like, "You're gonna have to let me read this when you're done." Uh, this is powerful stuff. And then, of course, the experiences of other people, 10 other people in here that have had similar situations that we've all been through. It's just, it's a powerful book, and I can't say enough about it. Native American Survival and Resilience by, of course, Kenneth Barnett Tankersley and Stephen Black Bear LeBeau. Um, Powerful, powerful stuff in there, and even the wampum belt here, the beadwork on the front of it, uh, yeah, that's beadwork. I was thinking maybe it was quill work. My eyes are not as good as they used to be, but the beadwork on the front of it is just amazing. Not only what it represents historically, but what it represents within the nature of what the book is about. It's powerful stuff, and I can feel this. It's got a message that just really it moves me to say the least. And I've already got, like I told you, I've got plans of buying copies of it and having it sent to several friends, family members, and people that have touched my life. That it means a lot. It really does. Is there anything that we missed? Yes, there's a ton of stuff we missed. That's the only thing I'd like to say before we call this a day.
Yeah, no, the book Native American Survival and Resilience. One of the reasons Black Bear and I wrote it, put it together, was to remind people that we are not alone, and that it goes through case histories, life histories. Our We have always communicated through storytelling, and we thought a good way, for the next 7 generations is to understand that the experiences they're going through, other people have been going through those same experiences, especially when you're working in the art community or in academia and
Right.
facing intractable conflicts, conflicts for which there are no resolutions, which all Native artists and all Native academicians face. Originally, I had my own chapter in there, but I didn't want to overwhelm the book. I wrote the introduction and the conclusions, and all the chapters were by all the wonderful people and storytellers of their life histories in between.
Yeah.
And my story I put into Rebury My Heart at Wounded Knee. Those are the experiences that I experienced during the second half of the 20th century. But again, we can talk about that at another
God, I
podcast.
hope so. I hope so. It has been a pleasure and an honor, Ken. It's wonderful knowing you. I hope that we can stay in contact on a regular basis. There's a lot of things that I'd like to discuss that I feel like um, some changes that we could make for the better. And I'd like to maybe introduce you to some people that I know, and hopefully, but in any case, I appreciate you so much being on here. It has been an absolute eye-opening experience, and your knowledge and information is invaluable. It's the most amazing gift to Native American communities, I think, in the world. So thank you so much. This has been another episode of Left Behind Natives, where we try to bring light to certain subjects and topics. And we hope to see you again here very soon. Charlie Montetuyela and Ken signing out for today. Thank you.
Donadako hone no wado hia do.
Bye.